It started at the lake house during one of those forced group getaways. My husband's company insisted I hadn't wanted to come, but he said it would be good to unplug. So I gave in. The afternoon blurred with the usual chatter grilled food, sunburn starting to show. People talking over each other like they hadn't seen the same faces all week. I was halfway through a drink when I noticed Enzo watching me, not in a casual, passing way, but with a steady, unreadable stare that lasted just a beat too long. I looked away, trying to laugh at something someone else said, but I could still feel it. Like a pulse on the back of my neck. Vince, Enzo's younger brother, made some throwaway joke about married life, but it landed strange, like he was covering for something. Later, when I was dragging a leaking garbage bag out to the bins, Vince came up behind me. We talked briefly, small talk, nothing real. When I handed him the bag, his fingers brushed mine. It wasn't long, just enough to register. He didn't say anything, just turned and walked off like nothing had happened, but it stuck with me. A few days later, my husband came home late, dropped his bag by the door, and said the boat project had collapsed. Something about funding, bad timing, Enzo pulling out. He looked tired, but not surprised, like he'd seen it coming and hadn't told me. Then came the part he couldn't hide. He owed Enzo a lot, more than he could cover quickly. I didn't say much, just nodded, made dinner, listened. That night, while he slept, I messaged Vince, said I wanted to talk. We met the next afternoon at a coffee place near the marina. Neutral, public, easy to leave. He listened, didn't interrupt. And when I asked if there was any way to ease the pressure on my husband, he just leaned back and said there were always options. He didn't push, didn't name anything directly, but the space between his words was thick with meaning. I said I needed time, and he said, of course, take all I need. I left feeling like I'd started a game I didn't understand, one where the rules weren't spoken out loud. Not long after that, I noticed something else, something quieter but harder to ignore. Caitlin, my boss, started bringing up my husband in ways that felt off. She asked too many questions, mentioned him in meetings for no reason, even showed me a photo from some random networking event where they just happened to be seated next to each other. At first, I laughed it off. But then she started texting him during work hours, things like resume tips, links to events, a joke about how she owed him a drink. I didn't say anything, just watched it unfold like a slow leak I couldn't stop. I told Maya about it over lunch, hoping she'd call me paranoid, but she didn't. Instead, she warned me about Vince, said he had a way of making people act against their own best interest, that nothing with him was ever casual. Her voice was calm, but I knew she meant it. I walked home wondering when exactly things had started slipping sideways, and how much of it I had already let happen without even noticing. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of day that feels like it's just filling space between more important ones. My car wouldn't start after work, and while I waited for a tow, Vince pulled into the lot like it wasn't strange at all. He said he was grabbing parts, offered me a ride, and I was too tired to argue. We drove mostly in silence at first, radio low, some old song humming in the background. Then he said something about how people always pretend not to want what they already think about too much. I didn't respond, just watched the traffic lights change. We laughed about something dumb after that. I don't even remember what. Something easy, something light, and then, out of nowhere, he stopped the car hard at a red light. He turned toward me and kissed me fast, like it had been sitting there waiting to happen. I didn't kiss him back, didn't slap him either. I just opened the door, stepped out, and walked the last 2 blocks home. My hands didn't stop shaking until I was already inside. I spent the next week trying to fix things that didn't have names. I suggested a weekend trip. Something simple, just us, no phones, no work talk. We drove out to the coast, stayed in a small motel with salt in the air and chipped paint on the window frames. I watched him walk ahead of me on the beach, and for a moment, I wanted to believe it could still be easy, but during dinner, his phone lit up twice, both times. It was Caitlin. He didn't hide it, just laughed and said she was asking about job listings again. I nodded, smiled, pretended I was fine. That night, I lay awake next to him, watching the ceiling blur in the dark, and when my phone buzzed around midnight, I didn't even flinch. It was Vince, just a sentence. You still look like the girl I met by the lake. I didn't reply. I stared at the message for a long time, then locked the screen, turned it face down, and left it on the nightstand. But I didn't delete it. I didn't want to. A few nights later, my husband sat across from me at the kitchen table, fingers tapping the edge of his glass, and said he was tired of the guessing, that nothing ever happened with Caitlin. His tone wasn't defensive, it was more like exhaustion mixed with frustration. Like he genuinely didn't understand why I didn't believe him. I told him I wanted to, and in that moment, I almost did. But the next morning, I found a small postcard in our mailbox, no envelope, just her handwriting and a red heart drawn in the corner. I didn't show it to him. I didn't say a word. Instead, I called Vince and asked if we could talk. We met at the pier where he kept his boat quiet. Gray water, no one around, we didn't touch, didn't even stand close. But the air between us had changed. We talked about the debt, or at least pretended that's why we were there. His eyes said something else entirely, and mine probably did too when I left. I told myself it was just a conversation, but I knew that wasn't the truth. After that evening at the pier, something in me settled. But not in a comforting way, more like dust after a collapse. I started going through my days more quietly, doing what needed to be done without thinking too hard. My husband thanked me one night, said he appreciated my support, that things were finally starting to smooth out. I nodded, let him believe that. Around the same time, Caitlin left the company without warning, some vague email about new opportunities and personal growth. No one asked questions. Vince reached out again, said he was willing to erase part of the debt if I was ready to trade it for something more meaningful. His words, not mine. I met his message with a pause, then replied simply, I've already given enough. He didn't argue, just sent back a smiley face, no words, and that silence felt heavier than any demand. For the first time, I wondered if staying calm was his way of holding control, and I started to fear what might happen if he ever stopped smiling. It was a Tuesday when Vince showed up at the store where I worked. He didn't say anything strange, didn't bring up the debt or the messages or the pier. He just ordered a coffee, made eye contact a second longer than needed, and walked out without waiting for it. I stood behind the counter, frozen for a beat too long, pretending to ring something up while my breath caught in my throat. That night, Maya called. Her voice sounded distant, like she was already somewhere else. She told me she was leaving town for a while, something about needing space, needing to start over. I didn't ask for details because I already knew she wouldn't give them. After we hung up, I sat alone on the couch with the lights off, holding my phone like it might still ring. The apartment felt louder than usual, the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, the creak of the hallway floor, and even in those simple sounds, I felt something pressing in. Like peace was no longer something I had access to. One evening, walking past a new cafe on my way home, I saw my husband sitting at a corner table across from Caitlin. They didn't see me. She was laughing, leaning in just enough, and he wasn't pulling back. I didn't stop, didn't take a photo or confront him. I just kept walking, heart numb, steps even. Later that night, when I asked how his day went, he said it was quiet, that he grabbed a quick bite alone. I nodded, same old nod, and pretended not to notice the faint smell of her perfume on his jacket when he dropped it on the chair. The next morning, I messaged Vince and said I was ready to close the debt conversation. We met again by the water, just like before. He looked at me like he already knew why I was there. He didn't talk business. Instead, he said, "You're more yourself now than you think." I didn't respond. I just stood there, letting the wind hit my face, wondering when exactly I stopped being the person I thought I was trying to protect. A week later, my husband packed a small bag and said he needed time with his sister. That things felt heavy. It started at the lake house during one of those forced group getaways. My husband's company insisted on. I hadn't wanted to come, but he said it would be good to unplug. So I gave in. The afternoon blurred with the usual chatter, grilled food, sunburns starting to show, people talking over each other like they hadn't seen the same faces all week. I was halfway through a drink when I noticed Enzo watching me, not in a casual, passing way, but with a steady, unreadable stare that lasted just a beat too long. I looked away, trying to laugh at something someone else said, but I could still feel it, like a pulse on the back of my neck. Vince, Enzo's younger brother, made some throwaway joke about married life, but it landed strange, like he was covering for something. Later, when I was dragging a leaking garbage bag out to the bins, Vince came up behind me. We talked briefly, small talk.